A scandal is rocking the hallowed halls of St. Michael's College in Toronto, but there's a disturbing sidebar to this story, namely how the usual suspects are using the ongoing St. Mike's dumpster fire to attack the very concept of masculinity. The details regarding so-called hazing rituals at St. Michael's College in Toronto are downright gasp-inducing. Indeed, the police are now investigating 6 cases that involve students of the all-boys Catholic school. Some of the assaults, including one incident in which a boy was violated in the most humiliating fashion possible. They were captured on video and shared online. It is sickening. Part of the investigation involves who at the school knew what when, and my hunch is when all is said and done, the number of heads that will roll is going to make the St. Mike's football field look like a venue for a bocce ball tournament. First off, to call these vicious assaults hazing is ludicrous. Hazing does not, or at least should not, involve brutal physical and sexual assaults. Hazing does not involve what amounts to posting child pornography on the internet. There's a line when it comes to hazing, and the line here wasn't merely crossed, it was vaporized. What happened at St. Mike's amounts to criminal code violations. And when the perpetrators are found guilty, they must go to jail or wherever they put so-called young offenders these days. But in the meantime, a perverse sidebar has emerged pertaining to this story, namely, one cannot pick up a paper or listen to a TV or radio broadcast without hearing 2 words bandied about by the usual suspects, namely toxic masculinity, which is apparently to blame for these atrocities. In a nutshell, toxic masculinity is about designating manhood as something defined by violence, sex, status, and aggression. It's essentially code speak for those men who act like uber macho a-holes. But here's the thing, the usual suspects aren't really speaking out against toxic masculinity, but rather masculinity, period. They are using the St. Mike's scandal as an attack on all men, not just the goon squad. After all, in the eyes of third-wave feminists, the mere concept of masculinity is in itself offensive. But is it a crime to be masculine? Of course not. I would argue that being masculine means embracing chivalry. It means standing up for what is right, as opposed to carrying out acts of senseless violence on those who are weak. Masculinity, like femininity, should be embraced, not condemned, for men and women are indeed equal, yet different, and those differences should be celebrated. By the way, have you ever heard the term toxic femininity being branded about? I sure haven't. Yet do a Google News search for sorority houses that are under investigation due to hazing rituals gone wrong, and you will encounter no shortage of stories involving women bullying other women, both physically and psychologically. Yet, will you ever see the term toxic femininity linked to incidents about underage women being forced to drink alcohol or have their derriere spanked with wooden paddles? Not a chance. Also, it should be noted, not all masculinity of a violent nature is considered toxic by the feminists and the other progressives. For example, such violent masculinity is actually encouraged if it's being used to further a leftist narrative. Which is to say, folks, do you remember the story that went viral a few months ago regarding Jordan Hunt and his altercation with pro-life protester Marie-Claire Bissonnette? Well, here's the video footage.
I meant to get your phone!
Yeah, that's the kind of masculinity the feminists adore, a man who presents himself as a non-threatening ally to womankind, or something like that, yet at the same time, an individual who will revert to his inner caveman and act out violently should he encounter a woman protesting against abortion, because that kind of violence, well, that is well deserved. Indeed, when we met up with Miss Bissonnette earlier this month, I asked her if anyone in the feminist movement had reached out to her post-assault. I mean, talk about the very bailiwick of a feminist, violence by a man against a woman. But the silence has been deafening. Check it out.
It's shocking. It kind of makes the point that they're more in favor of their ideology rather than the women themselves. So
You've kind of missed the plot, right?
yeah. They're there to support the ideology, and if women have to suffer because of their pro-women ideology, that's fine.
So what is the takeaway from all this? Well, two things. One, there's no such thing as toxic femininity, even though the evidence would suggest otherwise if we define toxic as acting out violently. And secondly, when it comes to a leftist-approved vision of masculinity, men should essentially act and look as effeminate as possible, but it's okay for them to get in touch with their toxic violent side when encountering anyone who espouses a contrary opinion to progressive values. I'd utter an expletive right here, but I guess I'm just too much of a gentleman. For the Rebel.media, I'm David the Menzoid Menzies. Hey folks, the Rebel has a new app. Please download that app and take the Rebel with you wherever you go.